All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are now going to talk about the Houston Texans and, what kind of season they had, what they did in the offseason so far, get into all that good stuff. So they once again won the AFC South. I thought they were going to be a lot better. I thought they were a little bit disappointing. Their defense was not defensively. Defensively, they have a strong unit, and Derek Stingley, very good player, in the secondary, and he got paid in the offseason. And Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson, they have a solid unit on defense, but I was definitely expecting more from their offense. I was really expecting them to take a big jump in year two. I thought C.J. Stroud would have a better year than he did his rookie season. I actually picked him to win MVP. I tried to, pick somebody else other than Josh Allen, which, if I would have just picked Josh Allen, I would have been right on that. But, I tried to be a little different. And, that ended up not happening. C.J. Stroud was kind of a mixed bag. There was a little bit of regression. I remember before the season started, my friend and I, were having a conversation about the Texans, and he said that he expected a regression from C.J. Stroud, so he was right when it came to that. But looking at the Texans season, so they finished 10-7. They were the number 4 seed in the AFC. They did win a playoff game though. We did talk about the Colts yesterday. From the Texans' perspective now, they knocked off the Colts 29-27. Stroud, had a couple of touchdowns. Joe Mixon. They picked up Joe Mixon. They traded for him from the Bengals, and then they also got Stephon Diggs, who had a couple of touchdowns in the game. Mixon had 159 yards rushing and a touchdown. So the Texans got off to a good start. Then they went up against the Bears. The offense kind of struggled in that game. Both teams ended up scoring 3 points each in the second half. Joe Mixon actually ended up getting hurt in the game and missed some time. Texans only ran the ball for 75 yards on the ground. Nico Collins had a big game, had 135 yards receiving and a touchdown. So the Texans got off to a 2-0 start. And you're thinking, all right, so far so good for them. But then this was a true test for them. They go up against the Minnesota Vikings at their stadium. This was an away game. And you thought, all right, let's see what the Texans are made of here. And they got, from start to finish, they got destroyed. 34-7. Game was never close. C.J. Stroud, a couple of turnovers in the game. Texans ran the ball for only 38 yards. Stephon Diggs against his former team only had 94 yards receiving. It was not a good day. It's not a good day for the Texans against the Vikings. Actually, the Texans had more total yards than the Vikings in the game, but still, it was never close. So then I was kind of like, all right, I guess maybe the Texans aren't as good as we think, and the Vikings, of course, went on to win 14 games. But then they proceeded to get back on the right track. They won their next 3 games. They beat the Jaguars. They beat the Bills in a close game. And then they beat up on the Patriots. They got Joe Mixon back, and he had 2 touchdowns. He had a receiving and a rushing. Stephon Diggs had a touchdown. Tank Dell had a touchdown. Nico Collins actually, I failed to mention, got hurt. Not in this game, but I think he got hurt after the Bears game, so he missed some time. C.J. Stroud 3 touchdowns, and this was in Drake May's debut. So at that point, the Texans are 5-1, but then on the road against the Packers, C.J. Stroud only had 86 yards passing. And despite that, they still could have won that game, but Brandon McManus kicked the game-winning field goal, so they dropped to 5-2. But then they beat the Colts to improve to 6-2. They proceeded to lose their next 2 games. They lost that ugly game against the Jets. Stroud went 11-30, 191 yards. The offensive line was not great in that game. But yeah, the Texans for some reason have a problem with the Jets. And then they had a big lead against the Lions, right? They were up, 23-7 at the half. Jared Goff had 5 interceptions in the game, and they let the Lions come back and win the game. Jake Bates kicked those two 50-plus yard field goals. They lose, and Stroud had a couple of interceptions. The Texans really couldn't run the ball against the Lions. They only had 56 yards on the ground. John Mechie actually was their leading receiver. He had 5 receptions for 74 yards. But yeah, I mean, they were missing Diggs because Diggs ended up tearing his ACL, unfortunately, and they still were missing Nico Collins. I think when did Diggs tear his ACL? Was it? I think it was against the Colts, I believe. He tore his ACL. So yeah, no Diggs, no Nico Collins. However, they did bounce back. They beat up on the Cowboys. Joe Mixon had a big day. He had 3 rushing touchdowns, and they won 34-10. But then they got upset by the Titans, which was odd. So yeah, they lost 32-27 there. But then they won against the Jaguars. So they were 8-5. And still, they did not. Actually, no, they did have Nico Collins. They got Nico Collins back at this point. I think they got him back. Did they get him back for the Cowboys game? Or was it the following week? They did. So they did get him back for the Cowboys game. Yeah, because he had a touchdown, I think, to start off the game, and then it got called back. I think that's what happened. But, yeah, so the Texans went into the bye week. They were 8-5, but, I mean, there was never really a point where you thought, oh, man, they're going to lose out in the division because all the other teams were, I mean, you got the Jaguars, the Titans, the Colts. They never really had a chance, even though they ended up, finishing 2 games behind the Texans. So then they came out of the bye, and this was, the tough part of the schedule. You had the Dolphins, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. They did beat the Dolphins. Derek Stingley had the game-sealing interception. Tua threw 3 interceptions, so that kind of helped the Texans out. Dolphins defense kept it close. But then you had the game against the Chiefs. And you know what? I thought the Texans, hung in there. Stroud did throw a couple of picks, but this was the game where Tank Dell had that horrific knee injury. He scored the touchdown, but, tore up his knee and probably not going to play in 2025 either. But yeah, that was, and, you had the shots of C.J. Stroud being emotional about it. It was a tough scene there. It really was. But yeah, they ended up losing that game 27-19 to go to 9-6. And then they got destroyed on Christmas against the Ravens, 31-2. C.J. Stroud went 17-31 for 185 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. But they did beat the Titans in the final game of the regular season. And then, against the Chargers, they had a good team win. I mean, the defense picked off Justin Herbert 4 times. They got after him. It wasn't looking good early on. But, Stroud had that play where, it was a bobbled snap, picked the ball up and, completed the pass. I think it was to either Xavier Hutchinson or Nico Collins, but that was like the momentum shifter. And the Texans never looked back. They won 32-20. And then they went up against the Chiefs in the divisional round. They ended up losing that. Stroud got sacked 8 times. The offensive line did not do a good job of protecting him. They could have won that game. They definitely could have. But, again, offensive line failed to protect them. They ran the ball well, the Texans, as a team. But, again, they were not beating the Chiefs in Arrowhead. That was just not going to happen. So they got knocked out. So they got knocked out in the division round. They won a playoff game. So C.J. Stroud does have 2 playoff wins to his resume. Yeah. You want to see them do more. And you look at, the stats for the Texans. So Stroud in the regular season, 20 touchdowns to 12 picks, 3,700 yards passing. You want to see the touchdowns go up next season. They did not bring back Stephon Diggs, so you're going to have Nico Collins. And, they did actually, they got Christian Kirk over from the Jaguars in division trade, so we'll see how that pans out. But Joe Mixon ran the ball effectively when he was on the field, over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns. Nico Collins had over 1,000 yards despite missing some time. He had 7 touchdowns on the season. I think had Diggs not gotten hurt, I feel like the Texans maybe could have brought him back, but I guess they didn't want to. And then looking at the defensive side of the ball, you had Danielle Hunter with 12 sacks, Will Anderson with 11 sacks. They have a solid unit. And then Derek Singley had 5 interceptions along with Kalen Bullock. He had 5. Lassiter had 3. Jimmy Ward had 2. But like I said, Texans, they had a solid unit defensively. Now, they traded Laramie Tunsil, which was a head-scratcher for a lot of people because, the offensive line was not very good. Why do you go and trade your best offensive lineman? I don't know. But they signed Cam Robinson, who is basically going to replace Laramie Tunsil. They signed Mario Edwards Jr., Lakin Tomlinson, signed for the offensive line Tremont Smith, the corner, signed a linebacker, MJ Stewart, a safety. They brought back Derek Barnett. They signed Darrell Taylor, another defensive end. They brought in Braxton Berrios. They signed Justin Watson. They brought back Derry Ugunbowale. Re-signed Sheldon Rankins for the defensive line. So, I could see the Texans going offensive line in the draft. Maybe. You could definitely see them maybe drafting a receiver at some point. Yeah, I don't know. Right now, when I look at Tankathon, they're projected to draft Josh Simmons, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. So, yeah, I think that's probably where they go, is offensive line. But, we'll see. We'll see. But looking at, their offensive and defensive stats, so offensively, they were kind of a middle-of-the-pack offense. They were 18th in points per game, 22nd in total offense yards, points per game. Yeah, we just said that. They ranked 23rd in team run blocking. They ranked 20th in EPA per play when using motion. They ranked 25th in yards per game or yards per play and 28th in successful play rate. And then defensively, 14th in points allowed per game, 6th in total yards allowed per game, and 6th in passing yards allowed per game. So, this again, defense was pretty good. 4th in sacks, 2nd in interceptions. So, they were 11th in rushing yards against per game. So, they got to improve this offense. If this offense can take that next step, this could be one of the elite teams in the AFC. And that's what I was kind of hoping for last year, but that just didn't happen. So, but that's where the Texans are at. Right now, I look at them as still the division favorites. Jacksonville is in rebuild. Tennessee, I don't really expect them to be a good team next year, even, with drafting a young quarterback. They're still ways away, even though they still have a good defense, but young quarterback, there's going to be some growing pains there. The Colts, again, the Texans are the best team right now. So that's kind of where we're at with the AFC South. And with that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to our videos and our YouTube channels, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to check us out wherever you get your podcasts to listen to us on the go. And, yeah, again, thank you guys for tuning in. We greatly appreciate you guys. All right. We greatly appreciate you guys' support. That's what I was trying to say. So, yeah, as always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.